episode of the 30 Days to Happiness podcast. We're speaking with a very special guest called Bradley Hook. He is the author of Start With Values. You have done some pretty cool things around the world. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Holly. Great to be here.
Cool. Well, now tell us more about your book, Start With Values. How did that come about? Is it helping people find their values, or what's the core message?
Yeah, so several years ago, it was about 6 years ago, I was in a boardroom where we had been discussing resilience, and the topic of values came up. And one of the executives said dismissively, "Oh, core values, it's a bunch of junk. You can't measure a value using a heart rate monitor or any diagnostic tool. So what's the point? Let's be practical." And that got me thinking, because I believe you can measure alignment with your core values with a heart rate monitor. When you're acting out of alignment with your values, you feel a level of distress, elevated cortisol, adrenaline, you can see a change in heart rate variability, etc. It has a visceral effect on your body and mind. And so it really got me thinking about this idea of values. Now, they got a bad rap for a long time. Values, people rolled their eyes. It was like words on vinyl stickers on the wall of the lunchroom, or words tucked away on the website of some company's About Us page. And I thought, we all have values, whether we realize it or not, and they do shape how we react or respond to situations, because if we're acting out of alignment with what's important to us, we feel a level of stress. We might feel some cognitive dissonance. We might feel like, "Ooh, I'm on the wrong path," or "my life lacks meaning." So the purpose of the book is almost a step-by-step guide to help people clarify what's most important to them, and then bring it to life through practical tools like micro habits and many, many other approaches that I've outlined.
This is so cool because earlier today I took my community through a values and core competency workshop, and we dived really deep. So I want to know, what's your process of taking someone through to find their values? Obviously it's a deep process, so you don't have to go through every single detail, but generally what's the timeline from someone not understanding their values to then getting so clear?
Hmm. So what I've done in the book is featured multiple ways for people to discover their values, because one method is the standard kind of list of values. Now let's select which ones resonate with you, maybe compare them against each other and come up with a top 5. The other is to look for what has brought you fulfillment in your life. So really taking some time to introspect and consider, what am I most proud of? That's a really important question, and I can tell you more about why later on. The other approach is to seek out those moments of flow when you're completely immersed in an activity. You've got the skills to match the challenge. It's intrinsically rewarding. Well, what's going on in those situations? Because usually you can uncover a value there. So for example, for me, surfing is something that I love doing. It's an activity where I'm in deep flow. What am I finding in surfing? Well, it's the value of nature, and it's the value of fitness, and it's a form of creative expression. So that's 3 of my core values. And you find it in those high focus flow state activities. So that's another one, looking for clues in flow state. And then, of course, you can just look to your environment and see what you surround yourself with, because that's often a reflection of what you value right now. So if I'm right now really valuing comfort, I might see clues in my environment that represent the idea of comfort. We can also look to our junk values, or the things that are not serving us. And that's a really interesting exercise, is to do a little bit of an audit of our junk values. Am I overly focused on prestige or reputation, or am I overly focused on or valuing, for example, comfort? That's one that we often value, and we realize it's not a core value. I'm eating fast food, or I'm sacrificing my well-being. I'm not doing fitness because I'm gravitating towards comfort. I don't want to disrupt my homeostasis. And we start to feel unhappy as a result. So looking at what is making us unhappy can also give us clues, because often it's the opposite that will bring happiness.
Yeah. Would you say the easiest way to find your junk values is looking at forms of self-sabotage?
Absolutely, that's part of it for sure. Like if I am a creative person and one of my goals or dreams is to write a book, and yet I never get started. Or I start writing, the process is never easy writing a book, very well, Holly. And if I find myself delaying or half writing a manuscript and giving up, yeah, I'm sabotaging myself. So there's probably a few things going on there. One is I'm not fully clear about the value driving that activity. And two, I haven't put in place the rhythms, the discipline that will enable me to get it done. I'm leaving it to chance. Whereas if I'm very, very specific about I allocate 1 hour every morning from this time to this time, and I'm not doing anything else, block that meeting with yourself, then you can actually start to get some momentum. And if 1 hour is too much, 1 minute, write one sentence per day.
Micro habit. Yeah, just starting with what's going to be like make most sense for you, I guess. You got to start somewhere. I know you mentioned like I love that you've got a bit of a sequence when it comes to the flow state and then looking at your environment. But I know a lot of the times we look at our past experiences to also determine our values. But I also have like the other question, which is the other side of things where, yes, our values make us who we are, but if we don't want to be that person anymore, how do we shake one of those values?
So values definitely change over time. There are these moments in life where you can't help it. Your values will change. For example, having a child is a typical example. People go from being quite focused on themselves, which you should be, to suddenly realizing, oh my gosh, from having a core value of freedom and adventure, now it's about stability and safety. And that's a huge transition for many people. But it also happens in terms of our careers, in terms of if you experience an injury. So if I valued fitness as my number one, and then by chance I injure myself and I'm no longer able to do the same type of activities as I could do before, it may only be temporary, you often see someone really struggling. So that's when you can start to lean on other values or identify other things that bring meaning into your life. So recognizing that values do change, you can definitely seek out clues from the past, from experiences, from what's really driven you before, but be willing and able to adapt and reshape what's most important to you in the moment so that you're actually preparing yourself for the best in the future. I always say, we seed both the future and the past from whatever we do right now. So getting clear about what we value today creates the future and the past.
Yeah. And I think how we're going to use our values, because I'll give you my 4 core values and then maybe we can workshop like how would someone use them? Because I think, yes, I think it is. People talk about values all the time, and I think it's got a bit of a I don't know what the word would be, a bad rep, because no one really talks about it in a way where we're talking about your values and not just the business values and the core competencies that come with it, right? And the image. So going from having your values on the wall in your office and the hiring process and, making sure it's all in alignment, I want to know like how we can use our values for ourselves and not just our businesses. Like my core values are connection, connection, accountability, fast action, and authenticity. So they're my core values. So how would I use them now that I know them?
Great question. I love this. Being clear about your values is the first step. And one thing I love about yours is that there are only 4. Some people come to me with a list of 10 and they have to reference a piece of paper or a poster to even remember their values. And companies make that mistake all the time. A company with 7 or 10 values, no one's ever going to remember it. So 4 or 3, or Brene Brown even recommends 2. I think 2 is a little rigid because 3 gives more flexibility, as does 4. You've got a few more options. Now, to bring your values to life, another way of looking at it, so we don't find ourselves rolling our eyes at the whole concept of values, is just to ask what's most important to me. Now, how can I use that value as a lens through which I observe my day-to-day challenges and opportunities? So I might be dealing with an inbox that's overflowing. can I, and I feel a level of stress, I've got a busy day ahead. How am I going to get through all of this? Can I use one of my values as a lens through which to observe or approach this task? So, for example, with the inbox full of emails, I might say, well, ultimately, this is about connection.
Mm.
It's communication with the world. So, can I use this as an opportunity to connect my best self with all of these people who have reached out to me? Okay, and there, of course, is a ripple effect of email. I reply, they reply, it can be chaotic. But if you batch process, so create a specific amount of time for processing those emails and use the lens of connection, because you value connection, suddenly it will diffuse the intensity of that negative emotion, that frustration, or that impatience, or that fight, flight, freeze, whatever it is. Remembering that freeze is often manifests as procrastination. There's so much threat in our environment that the safest thing to do is to do nothing or just scroll a feed because I might get some temporary dopamine relief from the suffering that is my inbox. But we can leverage our values as lenses. That's how I like to look at them. And for me, it's creativity, kindness, and freedom. So with every challenge or opportunity that comes my way, I ask, can I be creative? Can I be kind? And is this going to lead me towards freedom?
Mm. I love that. And I wrote down here, like, you've got to change your perspective, I guess, of your resistance, because then you can, again, like you said, just change the lens of how is this connected to my values. But for someone who's not aware of their values, it's just
Mm.
going to look like they don't want to do that, or it's going to look like resistance or procrastination, or I'm scared of that or something. So when it comes to like our personal and business values, I get asked this question all the time. Are there a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's important to me is not necessarily what is important to my company. Now, it's wonderful if there is some overlap, and many companies are trying, or at least the companies I work with, are trying to employ based on values, because then at least there is a foundation whereby what's important to all of us as an organization is somewhat aligned, all of the individuals. I've been working on quite an innovative way of co-creating company values because a company is a collection of people, right? At the end of the day. So instead of a consultant or the marketing team or the CEO coming up with a set of values and saying, this is what we value as an organization, which can work, what if we co-create the values? So I've developed a tool which enables an organization to discover what are the real values within your organization based on what each individual values. And it's fascinating. There was one company where they had no idea, but the top two values, when aggregated across the group, were
Mm.
harmony and flexibility. The leadership team had no idea that these were so important to their people. So what they did is they implemented nonviolent communication training, empathy training for leaders, and flexible working arrangements. And suddenly, overall corporate engagement went through the roof. People had been listened to. The the ecosystem at work was aligned with the values of the individuals. However, it's important also for an organization to have people with different values. If everyone just values freedom, you're going to see a lot of risk taking and a lot of, autonomy, but also potentially a lot of like star players that are not aligned with each other. You kind
Mm.
of need some people who value safety and compliance and making sure that we do the right thing at the right time. So a mix of personal values within an organization is a
Yeah,
really, but then
yeah.
being able to leverage the company values with practical tools. So if a company says we're innovative, being able to actually say, well, how does that manifest as a behavior? Okay, we can start to have that conversation, which is really interesting. You can define real practices for innovation.
Yeah, I like that because I feel like not many people talk about having mixed values and it's okay. Because it makes the company and it makes like, the community and the culture like the way it is.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a relationship. Like most of the time, there'll be one person who's optimistic and one person who's very logical. And I think that's what makes a relationship flourish the way it needs to. I'm the optimistic one. My husband is the logical one, which is like, let's take some time to think about it before we travel Australia. Or like, I'll wake up one day and go, I'm going to do this because that's just who I am. And it's nice because it gives me the balance, gives me the calm thoughtfulness. But I also bring out the side of him where I'm like, why don't we, let's go do this. So I think it works like quite nicely, like balanced.
That's
Um,
it. Mm.
yeah, I know you speak a lot about resilience, and I just want to know, like, what is your definition of resilience after, like, doing
Mm.
this for so long now and talking about it?
So our official definition for resilience at the Resilience Institute is that it's the learned ability, because we can always learn these skills. We're not born resilient. It takes 21 years, often a lot longer, for us to feel fully resilient and able to deal with life's challenges. And I would dare to say it's a lifelong journey. You're never fully resilient, but
Mm,
you can always add new tools to your toolbox. So it's a learned ability to bounce. Bounce is being able to navigate change and challenge and adversity, recognizing that we're all going to be on a downward spiral from time to time, but the objective is to bounce forward fast so we don't linger at the bottom of a downward spiral. The research shows 77% of the time people grow stronger as a result of dealing with adversity. That's called post-traumatic growth. Our objective is to fast track that growth so we don't spend too much time in depression or feeling really flat or low. The second component is what we call growth. It's all about energy, vitality. What are some practices that we can implement into our daily routines, some rhythms that provide us with the energy we need for our day-to-day lives? So this is sleep. Who would have thought one day sleep would be considered a practice? It used to just be non-negotiable. But if we look at the research, someone in 1912 slept on average 7.9 hours per night. Last year's research shows we're sleeping on average 6.3 hours per night. So sleep needs to be prioritized. It's an essential practice. Then, of course, movement, micro habits. We talk about all of these types of things. So let's grow. Then it's connection. Connection is
mm,
foundational. For some of us, that really is the cornerstone of our resilience. That includes emotional literacy, emotional agility, self-awareness, just being in tune with how I'm feeling at any point in time, and having the skills to down-regulate my nervous system response. That's critical for values as well, by the way, being able to establish calm and open the empathy portal. I like to think of empathy as a portal. The calmer you are, the more the portal opens up, the more you're able to understand someone else. That's the
mm.
foundation of strong connections. And finally, flow state. How can I create my high performance zone? Understanding the difference between focus, which is zooming in, presence, which is wide angle, and understanding how our attention is being fragmented by our information dense environment,
Yeah.
yet we still can deliberately cultivate the conditions for flow. So the definition is bounce, grow, connect, and flow. But there's another way of looking at it, which is anti-fragility. I love the concept of
Yeah.
anti-fragility. It's kind of like a muscle grows stronger when you exert pressure upon it. That's an anti-fragile system. Humans can be anti-fragile. We can grow stronger as a result of stress and adversity and chaos if we implement one essential practice, which is rest and recovery. Just like a muscle, if you train that one muscle for days, weeks, months, years, it's going to overtrain and eventually it will become injured. And it's the same with us, our minds, our bodies, our emotions. Rest is the critical ingredient for resilience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think it's well said because I think in today's, like, I mean, maybe before COVID, resilience was like talked about as your heart is a rock, you can get through anything, you
Mhm.
know, work ethic. But it's nice to hear and it's refreshing to hear a perspective that rest is like the other part of it. And I love that you've also mentioned like calm, flow state, because it is resilient isn't just go 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 and isn't just trying to like push away all your emotions. So how do you, I guess, draw the line between being resilient and not shoving your emotions under the rug?
Good question. So I think it all comes down to self-awareness and being able to tune into those signals in my body, in my mind, my emotions, to understand if I'm pushing too far. Because resilient people tend to push, 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 push. And the more resilient we get, in fact, you could almost say, I'm so resilient that I end up burning myself out. And that's not a great place to be. So it's all about that self-awareness and being able to tune into those signals that I experience. So, oh, that's interesting. I'm feeling a little fatigued. Is there anything I can do right now that will enable me to be the best version of myself? So maybe it's as simple as a slight postural shift or a micro break. I'll go outside, get some fresh air, a little reset over the course of the day. It's just all about being aware of how I'm doing and having some tools that I can rely on, but not waiting until, that critical moment when I have to present to an audience of 500 people to think, oh, I need to activate tactical calming my nervous system. And it's the
Yeah.
first time I've ever used that tool in a real world situation.
Yeah.
So that it is practicing in advance. Implement these tools so that instead of having to deliberately activate calm, I come from a foundation of calm. And every now and then I experience fight, flight, freeze responses. It's normal, it's part of life. That's all good. But I know how to bring my nervous system back to its baseline rather than coming from a place of I'm chronically stressed and I'm just constantly trying to find tools to bring me down. It's a different way of viewing life.
Yeah, and I think people look at tools in other areas of getting their, their peace or their dopamine from, external factors, right? Like alcohol or gambling or, just maybe doing something that is not within the values. So, um, yeah, I love that you have kind of like shown us there's another side to resilience. And those people, like, I definitely know a few, and I've been one myself, who just bottle everything up. So, what are some like great, I guess, actionable habits that we can implement besides obviously talking and being okay with talking about how you're actually feeling? But for someone who's quite like a high performing entrepreneur who is extremely resilient but bottles everything up and then explodes emotionally, we're talking about not just like a physically in fatigue. What are some actionable steps you can give those people?
I think it's about rhythm, everyday rhythm, so that you can balance your performance with care. And that really is resilience in a nutshell. And it's different. The perfect blueprint or web of habits is going to be different for everyone, but there are some foundational elements. So, and everyone's heard all of these things before, so it's going to be repetitive, but hopefully useful. Sleep, obviously, secure a good night's sleep because that's going to rejuvenate you. It's good for your metabolism, it's good for memory consolidation. It'll enable you to focus better in the morning. A morning routine. So I wake up and I don't just jump on my mobile phone and start scrolling. When you think of fight, flight, freeze responses,
Mm.
they evolve to protect us from predators like lions and tigers as we traverse the plains of Africa and out into the world. We're inviting lions and tigers into our bed by picking up the phone and starting to scroll first thing in the morning. The nervous system doesn't know the difference between a lion and an email. It will release cortisol,
Yeah.
adrenaline, and we find ourselves in that state. So a morning routine, and then of course throughout the day, prioritizing micro breaks, some movement. Busy executives often feel like they can't afford to have these short breaks through the day or prioritize their own well-being. However, that's probably exactly what they need to do. Now, meditation is an interesting one. It's not for everybody. For many high performing, highly resilient people, they would prefer to go for a run or do something active. So do that, prioritize that. When you start to notice these signals, don't allow it to become full blown anger and have an outburst. Impulse control is all about recognizing it, recognizing that there's been a trigger in my environment, and having a tool like tactical calm, which is breathe in for 3 seconds, out for 5 seconds, which activates the vagus nerve, which is the brake. It puts the brake on that runaway response.
Yeah.
That one outburst or meltdown can affect your reputation for years. People go, that's going to happen again. Look at what's going on over there. He's about to blow. You don't want to be that as an executive because it also means people won't trust you as much. So being able to recognize those signals. Oh, I find myself heating up. Okay, that's a good signal. Or I'm finding myself clenching my fists or gritting my jaw. What can I do right now? So we say, name it. I am feeling annoyed because of this behavior. Tame it. Breathe in for 3, out for 5, and reframe it. What are my options in this moment? What else could I do? And that's psychological flexibility.
Yeah. Wow, I love that. So practical. I actually did that yesterday. I had like 10 hours of back-to-back meetings and had way too much caffeine because I didn't sleep well the night before. And I knew I'd never do this, but I did. And I knew I was like, I shouldn't have another coffee, but I did. And I just was like, just agitated and I didn't know why. So I literally went through that process. I was like, okay, why am I feeling this way? It's probably because my nervous system is heightened and I don't feel in control right now of something that's happened. Take some deep breaths in. And then I chose to talk about it with my husband. And honestly, so much better. But I took ownership over that. I didn't blame anybody else. I was like, this is what's happening to me. No one else needs to be dragged into this, obviously, unless it's crucial. So I think taking ownership, like you implementing those practical, peaceful ways, is like, yeah, you taking accountability and ownership of your current emotional state and awareness. So I love that. And I think as well, would mention like meditation, like surfing for you is probably a form of meditation. Me, it's like riding horses or going for a walk or being in the gym. Like there's so many different ways that you can choose to meditate and just be in the zone and in the flow. um, and I guess for someone who doesn't really know, like if they don't want to meditate, like actually in like normal meditation format, um, and they don't really know what they like to do, like it's funny me saying this because I feel like I've never really been there. I've always known what I want to do and like my purpose and everything, but there's some people out there who have absolutely no idea what they like to do. So how does someone find that?
Well, this is something I talk about in the book where I say start with values for that exact reason.
I love that.
Find out what is most important to you, and then start to implement micro habits that enable you to live in alignment. So, for example, I might realize that I want to be a calm person. I value being calm, and I haven't been. I've been on the hamster wheel. I found myself chronically stressed for years and years and years, and I ended up burning out. So, how can I shift from a value of calm to being a calm person? And that's the identity shift. So I say, I'm a calm person.
Yeah.
That already is powerful. And now, in order to bring that value to life, I start off by practicing tactical calm, or give it another name, not meditation. For many people, even the word meditation is too fluffy and it's woo-woo. No, tactical focus. How about that? So I'm going to breathe out. When in doubt, breathe out. That activates the vagus nerve, brings you to a state of calm. I'll do that for 1 minute every morning, and I set a reminder. So I've prepared my environment. And, if you're interested in atomic habits and micro habits, there's great books on all of that kind of stuff. And then once I've built that into my routine, I gradually upscale it. And maybe eventually I'm meditating for half an hour, or I do active meditation, which is going for a walk in nature, or going for a surf, or going swimming, whatever
Yeah.
it might be. But really focusing on bringing those values to life through habits. And ultimately, what you discover is that you're leading a meaningful life. My actions every day align with what is important to me. So I'll give you an example. I had a week last week where I got to the end of the week and I felt like this has been a stressful week and something is really missing. And I realized I hadn't done anything creative. I was
Mm,
on the hamster wheel of reacting to emails, reacting to requests, trying to do lots of different things
mm.
after my book launch and all of this stuff. And I hadn't done anything creative. So on the weekend, I allocated about an hour and a half to writing a really good blog post on this exact topic. And just being creative again filled me with joy, and I felt fulfillment, and there was meaning. And it's so powerful when you align your actions with what you value most. If it's family, spend 2 hours with your child and go do something fun. If it's kindness, go and volunteer somewhere, and suddenly you'll discover your overall well-being and resilience increases dramatically.
Yeah, I love that. And I can totally relate to that. I remember like since having like my daughter, like the first 6 months, I was like, I just wasn't doing anything fun or joyful because my full attention was on her. And that's okay for a season, but I needed to go back to my values and what brought me joy so I could be a good mum and then a good coach for my clients.
Exactly.
And I went out and I was like, because I love painting and I love like being creative. And I was like, so like I went out and I bought all this, like, started painting again and, drawing and this and that. And that to me is like a form of meditation. I can just sit there and just let my mind wander and just be in the flow. And I used to get that from like my horses and horse riding. And now that I don't have my horses anymore, you do have to find it in a different aspect. So it's not always going to be the same way all the time. I think you've got to find it in different aspects. And another like client of mine, we did this very similar thing. He realized one of his top values was connection and also creativity. But he realized, he was like, "Oh, Holly, I'm just feeling really unhappy this week." I'm like, "Okay, well, what's going on?" And realized he didn't connect with anyone. He's a very social, bubbly person who hasn't connected with anybody, and he didn't do anything creative. So I held him accountable every single week to connect with at least one person a day, and like physically or on the phone, and play his guitar every day. So it's like a form of creativity, and obviously he's happier. So I just wanted to add that because it kind of relates to what you just talked about.
Exactly the methodology. And sometimes in our lives, we will be focused purely on survival. Those first 6 months, in my case, it was the first like 4 years. There was not much sleep.
Yeah.
It was intense. I mean, there are moments of joy when you look at the little fingers and
Yeah.
toy with them. Wow. But it can be quite stressful, and that's fine. So sometimes we will just be meeting survival values, getting enough sleep, nourishment, whatever it is. So in the book, I outline the values pyramid. Survival is important. Knowing how to downregulate your nervous system response by doing something creative like painting or breath work or walk in
Mm.
nature is critical, because then we can start to activate those higher level values, which in my model are belonging, because we all feel like we all need to belong. Love, camaraderie, community is really important for us as a social species. Then we've got growth, because most people really do want to grow, learn, expand their skills, do something meaningful. Above growth, I've got impact, because once you've acquired some skills, most of us want some form of recognition, whether it's financial, whether it's prestige, whether it's a promotion or whatever it is. And finally, at the top of the pyramid, we've got fulfillment. And I can tell you why fulfillment is so important if you're interested.
Go for it.
So we researched every couple of years, we run a global report at the Resilience Institute. And it was fascinating post-COVID how the results had changed. So we surveyed 26,000 people last year, and we discovered that the most important skill, if you can call it a skill, supporting the most resilient people, what differentiated them from the least resilient people was fulfillment. And that really got me thinking, wow. So the most resilient people, the highest performers, are prioritizing moments of introspection or reflection where they actually ask the question, what went well? And how often do we do this deliberately by design? Not very often. It sometimes might happen when you go for a run and you end up at the top of a hill and you see a beautiful sunset and you stop and go, wow, this
Yeah.
journey has been amazing. I'm finding so much meaning in what I've just
Mm.
done. But by default, when you're on the hamster wheel and you're in fight, flight, freeze, you won't even realize that you're actually making progress, that there are good things out there in the world. So this aligns with gratitude to some extent, recognizing that, hey, there's lots that has gone well, but we call it the WWW exercise, just asking yourself what went well, asking your family or friends what has gone well recently, asking your team what went well. It offsets the negativity bias and it creates some space for us to find meaning in the journey that we've been on. And it reminds me of once upon a time I was hiking in the Himalayas, and was incredibly unprepared for the experience. I mean, my friend flew over from Australia and we were like, let's go and do some trekking. We had done no training, we had no gear, but off we went. We didn't even have a Sherpa or anything, just the two of us and like a smile. Off we go. And it's a real grind. You walk up endless staircases. Like people don't imagine this, but most of the Himalayas is just stairs and you can't even see the top. And that's how life can feel sometimes. It's just a grind. But every now and then we would stop and just turn around and look at the view. And there you're in this most majestic environment, snow-capped peaks everywhere. And that to me is fulfillment. And we can always find it on our journey. And it increases your resilience and well-being. So prioritize.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why like it has to be intentional. Like, because otherwise we forget. Like, let's be honest, like we forget to do gratitude. We forget to stop and have a little think. We forget to say maybe I love you to your partner because we've just been so consumed with what's going on in our head. So I think like in a practical sense, like you can set alarms, you could, just write down a few things that went well that day. But I love that you asked that question, because that's a question that I put in my end of day reports for my VAs and even my clients. And it's the first question is, what went well today? And yeah, it's really nice that you've brung that up and kind of implement it into the story as well, because I think we forget when we are on a bit of a hamster wheel or trying, maybe attached to an outcome, and we don't feel like we're getting further and further away because we're focusing on the now and not the future, not the top, to enjoy those little steps along the way. And I know there's been multiple studies done that, happiness, the most happiest people around the world are also super resilient, and it's, hand in hand. So how can we use resiliency to become happier?
That's a great question. Well, I think that resilience enables us to navigate life's ups and downs without sweating the small stuff, staying calm, staying focused on what matters most in the moment, regulating our emotional response so we're not too up and we're not too down. We're finding equilibrium and we can deal with it. Also, acknowledging all of the good things, as we said, like taking time to appreciate this incredible journey of life that we're all on. Sometimes adopting that infinite mindset and saying, wow, my life is just the blink of an eye. And perhaps even getting a little philosophical and saying, perhaps we are apertures through which the universe is observing itself. And this is just such an incredible experience. How can I make the most of it? And suddenly, I'm enjoying my experience of life. I've put it into perspective. Yes, there's going to be ups and downs and there's going to be troubles. But if you're resilient, you'll find more space to really appreciate the good and the troubles, because we're
Yeah.
all going to encounter challenge. And when I ask people this question in workshops, I say, what are you most proud of? It's always difficult things. They were never easy. You're never proud of the things that just landed in your lap that were super
So
easy.
true.
I worked so hard for this thing, and that's what brings fulfillment. And to me, fulfillment is a lasting, more sustainable form of happiness rather than, and you know this really well, you talk about this, like happiness is not temporary pleasure. It's a sustained feeling of my life is aligned with what matters, what make also come from your values.
Yeah, I love that. And it just reminds me, it was really well said. And I think it reminds me of this, and I talk about it in my book actually, like an image. I remember I was scrolling on, I don't know, even if TikTok was a thing back then. I think it was, maybe. Might have been on video. And there was this guy in, like, I don't know, India, I don't know, one of those countries. And he was just eating his like noodles or pasta, and behind him he had, obviously I think he had an idea, but everyone was gone, but there was a cyclone going around him. And he's just sitting there calmly eating his noodles while everything around him is falling apart, like getting ripped up. I lost it. I thought it was so funny, but I thought, what a great representation of resilience and happiness. You can sit there and choose to enjoy what you have in the moment, no matter what's going on around you and the chaos, and choosing to look at what you, I guess, let's just say the positives, right? But looking at what you have right now, I think that to me is like choosing happiness every
Yes.
day when you wake up.
Yeah. I've interviewed so many people, and the common thread, so many of them say, as the ingredient for happiness and resilience, it all starts with presence, just
Mm.
being aware of the present moment. And it's such a hard thing to do. It's not like you can have sustained, lasting presence. Perhaps the yogis would say that's a form of enlightenment when you're no longer subject to the monkey mind that's dragging you into the future, dragging you into the past. Just being able to be super present and focus on what I can control. And usually it's the simplest things. It's my
Mm.
mindset, my thoughts, my actions, what I do or don't do, simple things like that. And if
Yeah.
we present moment, you can be sitting in the midst of turmoil and you can still be the center of calm.
Yeah, I love that. So true. I love making a list. Like anytime I'm overwhelmed, is like making a list of everything I'm overwhelmed about, crossing out everything I have no control over, because there's no point.
So simple.
Yeah, and just focus intentionally on the things you do have control over, and everything else will just seem to always fall into place, which I love. And I have one last question for you. This has been such an awesome conversation. And what's your definition of happiness?
Oh, it's a good question. So I've heard many definitions. One was given to me by the founder of the Resilience Institute, Dr. Sven Hansen. It wasn't my favorite definition, but it really woke me up. He said, happiness is a temporary relief from suffering. And I thought, whoa, that's kind of dark. So life is suffering. And if you acknowledge and accept that, that's quite an interesting acceptance because then you go, everything is great because you accept that there's going to be suffering and then you really appreciate all of the good things. So that's one lens on happiness. I think personally, for me, happiness is those moments of deep fulfillment. And I talk about this in the book. For me, it's these moments where I've created a little pocket of space in my day and I reflect on something that's gone really well. And usually for me, it's when I'm aligning with my value of fitness. So I'm out in nature, I'm on top of this little mountain near where I live, and I've just been running. It's been hard, it's uncomfortable, it's pushed me into distress. And suddenly I stop and you can look at the sun in its full majesty as it's dipping towards the horizon. And I go,
Cool.
ah, this life is worthwhile. So for me, I define happiness as moments of fulfillment.
I love that. It's beautiful and fits in with the triangle.
Exactly. The triangle is quite intentional in that respect.
It's beautiful. Like it's actually very well thought out and it makes complete sense. And I also wanted to ask, because like before this podcast we are talking or you were talking about how 15 years ago you would have dreamt to have the life you have right now. I want to know what has helped you build the life that you have right now.
Very good question. I think many of us slip into that victim mentality from time to time, and I certainly was there for much of my 20s and 30s, self-sabotage, limiting beliefs, thinking, well, I can't do this, or it's too hard, or I'll never get there, even though I had big dreams. And I knew that I wanted to create something worthwhile and to help people. I think that the real transition came when I took ownership and I said, I'm the creator of my reality, and I'm not going to blame myself or anyone else. I'm not going to be a victim of circumstance. And that was a pivotal moment. But then also putting in place habits that would provide me with enough energy to do meaningful things. So there was a big mind shift switch from victim to creator. And then aligning my actions with my values, implementing habits to ensure I have the energy to perform at my best, and then being of service. I think that's so important. You can't just make a dent in the world by yourself. If you are of service and you take on that mindset of I'm here to support others, to serve others, quite naturally you'll start gaining the momentum that you need. And it's a journey. Don't aim for quick wins or, fast publicity or whatever it might be. It's just a journey of adding value, and you never know how the dots will connect. But if you're
Yeah.
aligned with what matters, you'll get there.
Yeah, that's true. And it's just it is a journey and it's like a acceptance. Like we talked about the suffering, accepting life is not perfect. It's the same. It's like, are you willing to stay on the journey of life, knowing that it's gonna be a journey and you're not gonna get there really quickly, whatever the vision is, right? And sometimes like life is meant that way.
Yeah.
Because you meet new people, you experience new things. It gives you circumstances where you could write a new book. Like that's all part of the journey. And I just wanted to know as well, like, what are you most proud of?
Great question. I think I'm most proud of just trying so many things. I'm an innately curious person. I know so many people who want to do things, but they just never give it a shot. And I've failed at so many things, but along the way I've learned. And you never know how the little things that you've learned will come back and support you when you try something else in future. And you go, wow, it's so lucky that I developed those skills as a
Yeah.
technologist. Or so lucky I developed those skills as a speaker or developed skills with cameras and technology and all of that kind of thing. So I'm proud of just learning lots of things and pursuing my curiosity. I think that's what I've done well, even though often I found myself at a dead end. You never will regret the things that you tried. You'll regret the things that you didn't try. So I think that's been a big part of my journey. It's actually just doing things, even when other people were like, I've had people laugh in my face. Oh, you're going to write a book. That's so hilarious. Or you're going to go traveling for 3 years around the world. That's so irresponsible. And all of those paths led me to where I am today. And I think having compassion for your younger self, don't ever regret things. Looking back, and I sometimes look back at my younger self and say, hey, just keep on the path. You'll be all right. And there's this nice exercise where you try and listen to what would my future self say to me right now? And what advice would the future version of me give? And listen to it because there's a lot of wisdom there. And then give that same advice to your previous self because they're probably asking for it as well.
I really like that. Because I think a lot of the time, and even myself in the past, like have looked back at my old self, right? And just thought, I didn't like who I was. I can't believe that's who I was. And I think that's a beautiful exercise. And I think Alex Hormozy, he talked about a very similar exercise where he talks to himself as if he is his 90-year-old self and what he would tell him to do. And I think it's a really powerful exercise.
Yeah, it encourages self-acceptance and self-compassion. And it's inspiring as well because, if is my future self in 10 years going to be saying, oh, just chill, Brad. Or be really stressed right now. Yeah, that's a great idea. Of course not. My future self is going to say, don't sweat the small stuff. Have so much fun because you'll never
Yeah.
be as young and, you know, in 10 years' time, I'll wish I was myself today, even though I might look at myself and go, oh my God, I'm aging. I'm 46 and I don't, you know, it's all downhill from here. No, the 56-year-old version of me would be saying, love this moment because this is as good as it gets.
Yeah. I love that. What a great way to finish this episode. Where can people find you? I know we didn't really dive too deep into your actual story. So where can people find and learn more about you?
Yeah, so, well, the first chapter of the book is maybe way too autobiographical. I was thinking I need to pull that, but the publisher said it's great. It's
Oh, really?
know who I am. So the book is a great place to start. You can find out more on the website startwithvalues.com. It's being distributed by Penguin Random House, so you can find it on there. It's on Amazon. There is my personal website, bradleyhook.com. That's Bradley with an E, EY. And that's got links to my podcasts and all of my projects that I'm working on. And then I'm active on Instagram. So if you just search at Brad Hook and on LinkedIn, Bradley Hook, you'll find me on all of those platforms.
Amazing. Thank you so much for today. Is there any last closing thoughts?
No, just to say thank you, Holly. I love what you're doing. Your book is fantastic and you're a force for good in the world. And I really appreciate the opportunity to connect and talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you for joining us today. It's been so insightful. And yeah, go grab Brad's book, everyone. I think it's a great place to start.